Perfect. All right, Cam. Well, been listening to your stuff all week, loving it. I'm excited about what you got cooking. Some really exciting stuff. But before we jump into that, why don't you just, tell us a little bit about how you got into music at first?
Yeah. When I was little, I remember listening to my dad sing and wanting to be like him. And then probably around fourth grade, I decided I wanted to be a Supreme Court justice. So I went kind of down a whole other path and then actually ended up in psychology research. I think the best way to describe it is I think I was always like in pursuit of the truth and understanding. And then around 25, I started to feel like the psychology research path. I was working at Stanford and I just was like, I just feel like something's missing. And I asked my professor at the time, I said, who was leading the lab, I said, what do you think I should do? And she said, picture yourself 80 years old. What would you regret missing out on? Psychology or music? And it was kind of like a no-brainer from then. It was like, okay, I got to do it. So around 25 is when I decided I would be a professional musician.
That's great advice. That whole I forgot who it was. It might have been Steve Jobs or something like that, but he said, have you ever been inside a coffin or something like that? He's like, it's the worst place you could ever be. You regret all the things you never did. So, yeah, it's a little dark, but effective, I think,
Yeah.
And a little more morbid version of what the advice that you got.
I think that's kind of part of like Redwood Tree too. Like the first song on the record is like, I grew up with a redwood tree in my backyard in Northern California, but like being in the redwoods, you realize how small you are and how long they live. Just your life, you just realize you don't have that much time. And how are you spending it and who are you spending it with? And I think that's something that all of us right now are really thinking about. And it's, I don't think you can avoid regrets. You're going to have that. I think that is more tied to expectations and meeting them or not. But I do think feeling like you're in the moment, living it to the fullest and wholeness of who you are is probably the best you can do.
Yeah. So your dad was singing. What kind of stuff was your dad singing around the house?
He just sang, like he was not a professional musician. I didn't have any in the family to like look to. He just was, singing like Canned Heat and Elvis and, my mom would turn on Tom Jones and Joni Mitchell and Cat Stevens. And I was in choir. So I would sing like, I sang in like 14 different languages as like a kid, like children's choir. So I had all kinds of influences, like all different types, which I think is how most people are nowadays. There's not just one genre of music that you're into.
Sure.
But yeah, my dad just has like a very pure tone for someone who was never taught, how to sing. He is like a very clear pitch, and it just is like very warm, and he always just seems so happy in himself when he's singing. And I think that feeling was probably the biggest motivator, that he looked like he was happy in being himself.
The soul got to you.
Yeah.
So then what were some of the first steps that you took to start pursuing music or start just enjoying music or playing it?
I remember when I think I got a guitar and learned a couple chords in college from a boyfriend. And then the next boyfriend actually hooked me up with a laptop and like an interface and, taught me how to use Logic in the middle, like kind of like little bits. And then when I really decided to pursue music, I had a friend that I saw that was doing music too. And the more I saw, like, unfortunately I didn't see really any women, but I identified enough, I guess, with my male friends that were doing it, that I remember being at a party actually, and all the guys had gone downstairs to go have like a jam session, and all the girls were on the couch like talking and hanging out. And I looked at my best friend and I was like, I think I belong downstairs. And she was like, yeah, I think you do too. So you know, starting to go in that direction, and then making like the career choice, like, okay, I'm gonna stop taking a salary at a job at Stanford and instead, you know, figure out how to make this work in the music business. Like, that was a lot of time, you know, trying to make songwrite, trying to do demos. And it's just, you know, in the beginning, you're just feeling around in the dark. You have no clue. And the people that reach out their hand to give you usually help are probably not the tip-top quality people. A lot of times the contract you ever see is going to be like a horrific contract. And that's how it was for me too. And it takes so much in you to say no, because you want to believe that it's like some kind of fairy tale. But if you know what you're worth, and you should always have a lawyer read anything before you sign it. Like, if anyone's watching this that is in this position, because
that's good advice.
People really want you to just, where you're at right now, they want you to settle for deals that look like that. And it's like, if you know where you're going, you got to make sure there's room. It's like buying a really nice suit or some sort of tailored thing when you're only 16. It's like, you're going to grow. Don't spend all your money on something that won't fit you later. So
it's a great metaphor. Yeah,
there's a lot of learning that goes into that, and a lot of writing, and a lot of, you know, to be honest, like really crappy songs. And then you finally get somewhere. And I remember moving to Nashville, I threw everything I owned, which was like an air mattress and, you know, a suitcase. And my parents drove with me out here, and I was like, I thought at least I'll be a songwriter. I didn't quite have the balls to say that I would be an artist yet. And then when I got here, I got offered a really, you know, kind of not a pretty bad deal as a songwriter. I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it myself. I'm going to get a Kickstarter. I'm going to record my music. I'm going to sing it. I'm going to produce it with my friends. And also we got Jeff Basker on board, who's incredible, like, you know, massive producer. I'm going to do all this so that no one will underestimate me again. People won't have to assume what I'll be worth. They'll know it, and either they get it or they don't, and then we can either work together or we won't. And I don't have to say, sign me in the hopes that I'll become something, and hopefully we have the same idea of what I'm going to become. So yeah, that Kickstarter ended up being the first album, and that had Burning House on it, and luckily people heard it and got it.
That's great advice. Do you have any advice for artists who may be reluctant to do a Kickstarter or something like that? Were there methods that kind of made it that made you feel a little bit more comfortable just going out there and saying, hey, you know, I want to do this. Believe in me, and I'll give you something good.
Oh, like you mean I definitely felt weird asking people in the beginning, like, hey, I know you all are working jobs and making money, but I'd like to have some support to go after a crazy dream. Like, I kind of thought I was asking for too much money, or people would laugh or whatever. And the truth is, it was so sweet. Like, my community was so supportive. Everybody was just so excited for me, and, you know, wanted to see me. They believed in me, you know, and I don't know if that's always the case. You got to believe in yourself definitely more than most people will. But it was a nice opportunity to let a lot of people in to be a part of the ride. You know, I think there's a lot of emphasis on, you know, new artist awards go to people that have been doing it for like 10 years, you know, and you think your first step is supposed to be this huge splash. And that's that's like the 20th step. So
right.
Yeah, you know, it's a journey. And even now, like, I mean, that first album I put out 5 years ago, and here's the second album, and takes a lot of time to get it right, and it takes a lot of time to get all the business stuff in place and the creative stuff in place, and still be true to yourself and what you're trying to accomplish in your lifetime, you know? So everyone's doing the best they can. And I think trying to take you don't need the unnecessary shame part, whatever is making you embarrassed, like just, it's kind of not worth your time.
Yeah. So I feel like you taught, you know, you kind of got a couple pieces of equipment, a couple pieces of knowledge along the way through some relationships, and then suddenly though you have a Kickstarter and an epic producer that you're working with. So tell us a little bit about some of the in-between steps that happen between there. How'd you go from just being like, hey, I think I want to do this, to all of a sudden being at a place where you're with a great producer? Did you start playing a lot of shows? Were you writing a ton? What were some of the things that you did before you got there?
Yeah, well, I think I, was first had to learn guitar and started writing songs on guitar. And that was like while I was, and I played kind of like on the street and stuff. Like I remember I was studying abroad in college in the Netherlands, and I like played on the street and on the squares, and tried to like,
nice.
Even tried to like give my guitar away at the end and stuff, and no one wanted it. And I started playing shows around the Bay Area. I remember like teaming up with a friend's husband to sort of help work on songs and produce sort of like sort of an independent set of songs first. And probably made like 1,000 copies of that. And it ended up like that guy was also like a horrific person. Divorced my friend, was such a jerk. But that's, that's in the beginning, that's what you're kind of you got to sift through people like that, figure it out. It's not the end of the world. It happens. And then I met through another boyfriend. I met, it's really good that I had this crazy dating history. I know, I was about to say. Yeah, I met the guy who's now my like musical brother, who's Tyler Johnson. He produces and writes with me, and he also works with Harry Styles and Sam Smith, which is also like, kind of how this sort of neighborly setup happened. And I ended up working with, opening up for Harry Styles and working with Sam Smith, and then now having their songs on this upcoming record. And, but rewind, the reason I am here with all that stuff is because I met Tyler through a boyfriend at the time, and played shows kind of in LA a little bit, San Francisco, and met some people. Like I remember he knew somebody that said she knew Faith Hill, and we could get our songs in front of Faith Hill. And we were like, this is amazing. So we did spent like all the money we had on these 5-song demo CDs or whatever, and putting it all together. And of course, like, she didn't really know Faith Hill in the way that she said. Oh, no. That's any stories about the beginning are going to look like that kind of. And, but then that CD, I remember my same roommate who said that I belonged down playing with the guys in the basement. One of my best friends, she had her mom's cousin knew somebody that knew somebody. She said, give me one of those CDs. And it got to a guy who used to manage like the Dixie Chicks and Tim McGraw. And he had an independent artist that wanted to cut one of the songs. And at the time I was like, I have made it. This is my big move. And I, signed like a single song contract and gave that song away. And that was enough for me to think, like, kind of ignorantly, but also thank God I did, that I really could make it, at least as a songwriter. So that's when I packed up my stuff and moved to Nashville and I was working on the side, like as a nanny, and did some like background singing gigs for like, I think there was like a Christian album that I did background vocals on. And I played in a kind of a swampy trio that sang in bars in Alabama, and just, whatever way I could make money. while I was trying to put together this music. And I sort of hid myself. Like, this was my manager's idea too. She was like, you only get one first impression. So while putting all this stuff together on this first album, Tyler had been working with Jeff. That's how we got to work with Jeff. And we didn't meet with anybody until it was ready to go. And then we took, you know, the best thing that I could have made at that time into, like, you know, the heads of Sony and Universal and all the big labels. And that's when the head of Sony at the time, Doug Morris, sat there in we were in this super high up office in New York, and he sat there listening to Burning House and started singing along by the second chorus and was like, this is the reason I got the music business, for songs like this. And he tried to sign me on the spot, and I was like, call my lawyer.
Smart. Yeah. Well, that's an amazing story. That's like literally something out of a movie, you know, just the quintessential big office, high rise. Let's sign them right now, you know.
I know, it is wild,
but it's
not. I don't think it always goes like that. So I feel pretty lucky and privileged and all the things.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's like you said, every artist is a new artist to you if you've never heard of them, and so you don't see all the work that goes into what all these artists do to get to the point where that you do hear of them, where you are hearing about them. So you did all that work before you got in that office. I know we're on a tight timeline, so thanks for telling us, you know, how you got, a little bit about how you got to where you are now, and but really excited to hear about what you're working on now and what's coming out, because I was listening to your new single, Classic. Love it. And you produced it with the artist I'm really fond of, Jack Antonoff. So been a fan of his since, you know, Fun and Bleachers, and he's, you know, we all know he's writing with a whole host of huge artists nowadays, like Taylor Swift and St. Vincent, to name, you know, a couple of the new bigger stuff he's been doing. But how was that? Because I hear a little bit of that in there, and I loved that your music, especially your kind of, would you call that an EP? Because or is that just you released Classic with a few other songs off the upcoming LP, right?
Yeah.
So is that a single, or is that like
kind of like little tastes of? So the second album comes out at the end of this month, October 30th. It's called The Other Side. There's been a couple singles off of it just to sort of get me sane, you know, and put some stuff out leading up to this. But, you know, Diane, Till There's Nothing Left, Redwood Tree, and Classic, which are all, you can tell, like, when you listen to them, Diane is like the response song to Jolene, like stacked acoustic guitars, really up tempo. And then there's Till There's Nothing Left, which is like a steamy, like big snare drum, like I'm going to give you everything, end of the world type song. And then there's Redwood Tree, which is this nostalgic, but still sort of like a rolling beat, like talking about time and missing your parents. And then there's Classic, which is this up-tempo. It does feel like Jack Antonoff, you know, like he's the one who I co-wrote it with, and he produced it, like jangly, sort of like a Simon and Garfunkel Cecilia vibe, like nostalgia, but then also talking about how all these things come and go and trends come and go, but there are people in your life that are stone cold classic, like love story to those people that last. And the album has, like, what's going to come out too, the rest of this album is the title track, The Other Side, has Avicii, Tim. We wrote it a while back, and it's just, he is such a perfectionist, wanting the song to be perfect. It was like a really incredible songwriting session where I like was kind of overwhelmed by how much he needed it to be perfect. And he put the vision for the song ahead of the comfort of everyone in the room. And at the end, I was like, this is what a masterclass to have had that time with him and learned. And I'm so thankful I got to put it on this record. It was a huge responsibility to try and make sure, you know, it lived up to his legacy now without him around to sort of help make sure that it was got across the finish line. It was a big thing to make that perfect. But that song is just epic. And it's, you know, kind of like dance country, which is incredible. And I have, you know, a song that Harry Styles wrote, which is kind of about this ache of growing a little bit out of, sort of like when you outgrow your hometown, and that feeling. And Laura McKenna wrote on it too, and Tyler. And I have Sam Smith, you know, writing Happier for You, which is, you know, this sad, beautiful statement of like, I'm not there yet. Like, I want to be happy for you. I want to be over this, and I'm not there today. Maybe later. It's just, there's something on this record. I like to make records and albums that are like all the different colors and all the different lessons, and not just, oh, I picked a bunch of songs and we're going into the studio with the band and it's all going to sound like the same thing. That's not my process. And definitely over 5 years since the last album, to have this much time to make sure I could grab from all the different lessons I've learned and sounds I love. This is definitely something that's, like, I keep joking, it's like Mary Poppins when she pours the medicine, it's different colors for everybody. It's got something for everybody on it, because it's meant to be like a full spectrum of feelings and healing. So I'm really grateful that I get to put it out right now, because I think there was this moment, like when the pandemic, you know, was sort of fully named. Right. This is what's happening, and we're calling it a pandemic, and we're going, it was like, oh shit. Do we, like, a lot of people started pushing back releases, and there was this moment of, do we do this? And to me, this is when it's more about music than about music business, because we've had music in every culture since the beginning of culture. This is something that we absolutely need as human beings, and in a time that really is calling for a lot of healing. I think the more music and whatever way you can heal yourself, like, let's grab onto those things. So I'm really grateful that I get to, like, gift something to people that hopefully can help them out right now.
Yeah, and it really is. I was just having a conversation about that the other day. I really feel it in these past whatever months we're on now, 5, 6, whatever it might be. The things I miss the most are live music shows, you know, and so that just, it really shows the value of music, you know, that you are creating something of value, that and maybe much more so than some, you know, than musicians are given credit for sometimes. But yes, everything you said about the album's true. I love that it's country, but it's I think and you can just tell by the people you're working with. Obviously, you have a wide love of all music, and you feel that in the music. There's definitely that crossover appeal for a lot of this. So very exciting stuff, and huge artists, as you mentioned, that you're working with on this album. So very excited to hear all the rest of it that you haven't given to us yet. But I think we're about at the end of our time, so we'll let you go. But before we do, we like to ask if you had one piece of advice. I think you've given a few golden nuggets so far, but if you could give one piece of advice to aspiring artists, what would it be?
I think for the art part, for me, I literally feel it in my gut where I'm supposed to be going. So I think trust yourself and keep it open. Don't get into the judgment and the critical and the editing phase until you've let your gut have a bit to just, and your heart, you know, to sort of put something out. And then you can go in and edit after you're done with that. And then the business part, get a really good lawyer. And remember that you're a business, and there is a market share, and there's a set amount of money that's happening in this music business, and it's going to people, and you are responsible for making sure that it goes to you and your people, because there's money and it's in it and it's going to people. Do you want it going to them or you want it going to you? So you gotta figure that out.
That's a great way of putting it. It's going somewhere.
It is going somewhere. Don't be mistaken. Sometimes I think there's like this, romantic, I've got to be poor and struggle and maybe I don't deserve it. And it's like, I mean, that's cute and all, but like, then that money's just going to other people that are working in offices, and some of them deserve it and some of them do not. Bring it back.